Hello, welcome to Inside the Tape. It's an Inside the Birds presentation. Of course, Inside the Birds big game coverage is presented by Green Lawn Fertilizing. We're so excited to have Green Lawn Fertilizing on board to bring you guys all of the coverage leading off to kickoff. Geoff Mosher with Adam Caplan, and we are joined, of course, by Greg Cosell to go inside the tape. Now, there was no game. Of course, there was a week off in between the conference championships and the Super Bowl. The Eagles and the Chiefs are going at it for the second time in 3 years, SuperBowlLIX. And for those watching at home, both Greg, all three of us, Greg, Adam, and I are in New Orleans bringing you this presentation. So here, let's start off with a big picture because we don't have all 22 clips here to go over of any game. We're going to get really heavy into the matchups here on Inside the Tape. So, Greg, you watch tape of both of these teams.
Yeah.
And I want before we get into Eagles offense versus Chiefs defense and vice versa, your big picture outlook on what both teams do really well on tape and what both teams maybe would like to improve upon, even though they're both in the Super Bowl.
Well, here's my profound statement, okay? Stay with me here. This is going to be
Stop the presses. Stop the presses.
Really deep. The Eagles run the ball really well. That might be a surprise to you, but I just thought I'd start there.
Is that what the tape shows, Greg? Are you sure?
Yeah, they run the ball really, really well. And their offensive line, by the way, is very good. So that's my bold, controversial starting statement. So I think, to me, being serious for a moment, we know they have the number one defense in the league, but I feel like that the true foundation of this team and which allows them to play the manner in which they play is their offensive line. I think that is truly the foundation of the Eagles team, and that allows them to really dictate how the terms of engagement, let's use that term, dictate the terms of engagement. Because the bottom line is, guys, is the Eagles are really antithetical to the way we view the National Football League and offense these days. We think that everything big play based comes from the passing game. The Eagles are really anathema to that. They don't really play like that, which, of course, doesn't mean they don't get any big plays in the passing game, or they might not get big plays in the passing game in the Super Bowl. But the bottom line with this team, I think we all feel, and I'm sure fans do as well, that when you watch the Eagles, that it's inevitable that Barkley's going to break off a couple of long runs, that you're just waiting for it to happen. It could happen on the first play, as it did against the Commanders. It could happen in the second quarter. It could happen in the fourth quarter. And I go back to really, I guess, the third game of the year where we were uncertain of what the Eagles were really offensively, and even uncertain a little bit about Barkley. And that game's close early in the fourth quarter, and Barkley breaks off that 65-yard touchdown run against the Saints. And that seemed to be, okay, this kind of can happen anytime in the game.
Absolutely. So what would you say the Chiefs do fundamentally the best? Stop the presses again.
Yeah, that's a hard question in terms to pick out one thing. I mean, I hate to say, not say something about Mahomes because he's so special, but I almost feel like the thing that stands out when you watch them this year, the way they played this year, okay, is almost like it's inevitable that Barkley's going to break one. It's inevitable that you're going to see a blitz by Steve Spagnuolo in a high-leverage critical situation in the fourth quarter that impacts the game. I almost feel like that is really a defining feature of the Chiefs. And again, for people listening, I don't want them to think, you don't think Mahomes is great? We know Mahomes is great. That's not my point. But I just think that, don't you guys agree? You kind of wait for that. You wait in the fourth quarter that you're going to get a blitz that's effective.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just going to say that with Spags, this has been his calling card for a while. I mean, we go back to the Giants and the way they coached when they won the Super Bowl. And it's funny, Geoff, that the players didn't buy in initially. It was actually a problem until they really understood what Spags was trying to do. But once they bought in, they went on that Super Bowl run. There might be a point, Geoff, as I throw it back to you, that we start talking about Steve Spagnuolo as one of the best defensive coordinators of all time. Look at the job that he's done.
Oh, I think that's right now, Adam, but I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think that's true right now.
Yeah.
I think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't think. I mean, he's got
if
4
there was
rings.
such a thing, right?
Does he not? Well, yeah, that's true. If there was such a thing, he's got 4 rings. He could get his 5th here, so I would imagine that he's going to be in the Hall of Fame.
And I know I'm biased a little bit because I know him and I like him. We have a relationship, personal relationship. But people look back at the year he was with the Rams, and they just say, "Oh, he's not a head coach." People probably forget. And again, I'm not going to sit here and say he would have been great, but that was the lockout year, and they drafted Sam Bradford. And Josh McDaniels, some might remember, was his OC. They couldn't work with Bradford at all. They couldn't work with him. So, I mean, here he's a new head coach hiring an offensive coordinator that many thought was great because of the success he had with Tom Brady in New England. And then they drafted a quarterback who was pretty much a consensus #1, by the way. That wasn't a reach to draft Sam Bradford, as you guys recall. And they couldn't work with him. And then they had to start the season unable to work with a rookie quarterback. And it just snowballed. So again, I'm not defending him, but that's a tough situation. Any coach, you guys know this, would tell you how tough a situation that is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, Greg, let's flip that before we get into the real meat and potatoes of this. One thing from each team would love to improve on by the time this game kicks off on Sunday.
I think from the Eagles' perspective, I think you want to feel that your passing game can be a little more explosive. And again, you never know how a game's going to play out, but I think just as an abstract point, you would like to believe that in this game you're going to want to make some explosive plays in the pass game. That's a general statement. We can get into a little more detail on that. But I think as a general statement, I think you'd like to feel like your pass game can create some explosive plays if you're the Eagles. From the Chiefs' perspective, I think there's a number of things because they've had a very odd season, a great season, but an odd season offensively. I just remember 2 years ago in the Super Bowl, totally different Eagles D coordinator, obviously different season. So I don't want to say it's apples to apples, but I feel, believe it or not, as if the Chiefs want to run the ball and have success running the ball. And by success, I don't mean they need to run for 180 yards on 40 carries. But, I think they had meaningful success running the ball in the AFC Championship game and certainly in critical moments. And you may remember, well, you guys remember, not me, of course you remember, that they came out running the ball in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. And I think that they'd like to feel that can be a meaningful part of their offense.
All right, good stuff. Good stuff. We will get into the meat and potatoes in 1 second. Right now, we're talking about the Eagles and their green. And speaking of green, if you're already stressing about your lawn this spring, our friends over at Green Lawn Fertilizing can help. Based right here in the Philadelphia area. Well, we're in New Orleans, but they're in the Philadelphia area. These guys are the experts in the region's conditions, including PA, New Jersey, and Delaware. They know how tough that drought was last year, and they've created a custom blend and approach that will help your lawn recover. And after what we all went through last year with how hard it was to keep nice, lush lawns looking green, keep our neighborhoods looking beautiful, all we want is a great solution. And that's what our friends at Green Lawn Fertilizing have to offer. So be sure to sign up now to receive 10% off. I'm told this is a very limited time offer. So head to the link in our description or greenlawnfertilizing.com/insidethebirds to take advantage. Just be stressed out by what's going to happen on Sunday when the Eagles take the field. Do not be stressed out at all about your lawn. Just call Green Lawn Fertilizing today. All right, Greg and Adam, obviously we will start off and talk about this Eagles offense against the Chiefs defense because, as you mentioned, you're always checking for Spags and what he's going to do. I would think, Greg, the Eagles want to win first and second down and stay out of those third down situations that plays into Spags' hand. How do you think the Eagles might come out from a personnel grouping standpoint? Do you 11, 12?
I'm glad you started there, Geoff, because I think that's the starting point is what they decide to do from a personnel standpoint. Because we know that the Chiefs, their base defense is 4-3, and Leo Chenal, who's a very good football player, by the way, plays in their 4-3 as the third linebacker with Tranquil and Bolton, who are both very, very good players. So if the Eagles go 12 personnel, my guess is you'd see the base defense. So the question is, how would the Eagles prefer to run the ball? Would they prefer to run it against the base 4-3, or would they prefer to run it against their nickel, which would likely be the case if they go 11 personnel, although Chenal does play at times in the nickel, especially on early down. So, I think that's the starting point. I don't have a brilliant answer for that, being honest, but I just as a point to watch in the game, guys, I think that's something to see early in the game to see how the Eagles decide to play this from a personnel standpoint.
Yeah, it's Geoff, it's an interesting matchup because when you look at what Spags does, he's willing to change things up. We know that they play more man than most teams.
Yes.
I'm interested to see, and we talked about this a lot the last couple of weeks. What does he bring out that he thinks, because you just don't bring something out for the heck of it. You bring out something it's going to work. And Geoff, it's this offensive line is hard to beat. We know it. It's the best in the National Football League. I mean, talking to players this week, guys have retired. One guy said it's one of the best in NFL history, which there's no way, there's no way to know that, but you could certainly say you could say it's the best in the NFL. I wouldn't argue against it. I mean, very, very good. You could say that by just watching with your two eyes. But so you wonder what does Spags find that is a matchup that he could win? I'm fascinated to see how this is going to work.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, we don't know the answer to that because, now it also gets down to how he lines up with his front and his linebackers. And, and we don't know. Those are real X and O tweaks that we just don't know. But, this O-line, it's funny. I think I spoke last week about that, guys, that this O-line just has me believing. I mean, I just think this O-line is so good. And, yes, the Chiefs' D-line is good. And they've got a lot of position versatile, alignment versatile players. But, boy, have we seen this O-line true? I mean, you guys might remember each game a little better than I. I know they had one game that I recall where they didn't play really well. But other than that, they've played really well in almost every game.
Greg,
one thing,
most people. Go ahead, Adam.
I was just going to add this one more thing. So now that we know Dickerson's doing better this week, Landon Dickerson with that knee injury, getting him off his feet. See, that was one thing I was concerned about when we're talking about matchups because he couldn't finish the last game. Okay, we know how much he struggled. So maybe that not that we know he's going to be 100%. He's still listed with the injuries. They're not working a ton this week. They started working last week, but that's one thing I was concerned about, the health of Dickerson's left. By the way, it's his left knee. Dr. David Chow told me from a video study. That's what the knee, it's his left knee. So that's something that, by the way, the Chiefs know this from their tape study. That's one thing I'm very interested to see how well his movement is in this game.
Yeah, and both of them were full participants earlier in the week in practice, just to let people know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Greg.
And that's obviously a big deal. Adam makes a great point because if it has to be Tyler Steen, then you have a somewhat of a weakness on your O-line, and that can be exploited. But if it's Dickerson, and he's the kind of guy, I mean, this goes back to his college days. I mean, he's a lunatic in a good way. I mean, he's the kind of guy, if he can be out there, he's out there.
No, we're not questioning whether he's going to play. The question is, Geoff, as we send it back to you, can he play all 60 minutes?
Right, that's the question. Right. He's going to start the game.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the same thing I would say with Cam Jurgens when you're dealing with a back injury. Yeah, he's going to play. Is he going to be able to bend? Is he going to stay low? I mean, is he going to have to come out because he gets tight? Who knows? I mean, when you're dealing with a back injury, there's an unpredictability level of it that you just have to say, hey, I hope you get your best effort and we can get from you what we can get from you in the last game of the year. But you really don't know.
He'll get a little medical help with that, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm certain.
Yeah.
So, Greg, everybody knows about Chris Jones's ability to wreck a game. People know about Karl Loftus, a first-round pick, Trent McDuffie. Who are some of the players on tape for the Chiefs that show up that maybe aren't household names, but are either a big part of run defense, pass defense, blitz packages?
Well, start from the D-line and work backwards. Michael Dan is a really good football player, he's one of Spags' favorites too. I've had that conversation. And he can play inside, he can play outside, depending on their packages. I think as you work back, I mentioned Tranquil, he's a really good football player. And he doesn't, they play dime, he does come off the field, and they do play a lot of dime. Although sometimes he stays on the field and Bolton comes off, which tells you how much they love Tranquil. And he's a really good player. On the back end, Justin Reed is a really critical player for their defense. He's very much part of their pressure packages. He matches up to tight ends man-to-man. He can play in the box. He can play on the back end. As I said, he plays man-to-man. He's a great blitzer. He times blitzes extremely well. So those are three names I think that, are really good football players on the Chiefs D.
Greg, one thing I would ask you on their defenses, because you alerted us to this a couple weeks ago. I know we're going to talk down the line here, with matchups and so forth. But Trent McDuffie, to me, and I know he's a really good football player. If I'm Spags, and I know they're not great at corner overall, not as good as maybe the Eagles are, and I know you won't know until game time, but do we still think he's still full-time outside corner now? Is that kind of where from your tip study? Still doing it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And certainly against this team, because Brown lines up outside. I mean, what we've seen in the last 4 weeks, give or take, like maybe it's 5 weeks, is he's played exclusively on the outside. What they've done opposite him is they've played Johnson, and then they played predominantly Jalen Watson since he came back from injury. And the slot, who's kind of a hybrid safety slot safety, he's kind of a slot corner safety hybrid, is Chamari Connor, who's actually a really good football player too. So I can't imagine that McDuffie's going to play inside in this game. And I think you're going to see them. It wouldn't surprise me if he starts the game off with the idea that we're going to play press, we're going to commit to the run, and if they want to beat us throwing the ball on the outside, let's see if they can do that. Now, he may not do that because you certainly don't want to give up a 50-yard play, but, it wouldn't surprise me. Let's put it that way.
All right, good stuff. Let's flip it and get into the Eagles' offense against the Chiefs' defense. And, Greg, some of the tendencies you've seen on tape from both. But before we do that, we want to remind everybody, this ain't the little itty-bitty, teeny-tiny bowl. This is the Super Bowl, LIX. You can get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 59. Scoring touchdowns is key to hoisting the Vince Lombardi Trophy. And if you have a shot to score big by betting on them at DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. New DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code ITT. That's code ITT for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5 only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. That's 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-878-9777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. New customers only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. We're talking about now the Eagles defense against this Chiefs offense. So, Greg, what sticks out about the Chiefs offense that will present a challenge for the Eagles defense?
Well, again, you mentioned personnel with the Eagles. I think you have to start there with the Chiefs. Over the last couple of years, the Chiefs have really evolved into being a heavy multiple tight end offense. They've been among the league leaders in percentage of playing with 2 and 3 tight ends combined over the last 2 years. It's well over 40%. It's closer to 45, 46%. So they really are a multiple tight end offense. Obviously, Kelsey can line up anywhere. Even Noah Gray has shown that he can line up anywhere. So I think, that's the starting point of their offense. That's what it's been. Again, you just don't know the answer to these questions, but that's what it's been. And their pass game, kind of still works off of that. They've become a much more of a quick passing game. They don't really attack. And again, this is all we have up to this point. So let's be clear about that. You never know in a Super Bowl, things can change. But they've been much more of a rhythmic type passing game. They've not really pushed the ball down the field. Amazingly enough, on passes 20-plus yards or more from the line of scrimmage in the air, I'm talking about in the air, Mahomes has not attempted many. He's near the bottom of the league in drop back attempts, throws like that. and he's not completed a very good percentage. I think he's the worst in the league at 26%. So their offense is much more about third down conversions and the schematics of what they do on third down. That's really what it's much more about. That's what it's been about.
Greg, I want to follow up one question here, because you're talking about the lack of the downfield passing game, which has been evident, really, quite frankly, the whole season. Hollywood Brown missed a lot of the season, so that's part of it. But Xavier Worthy's had an interesting season. It's not been quite what I thought downfield, but he's still making plays. What are your thoughts on Worthy from your tape study?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because during the regular season, Adam, he only had 4 receptions of 20 or more yards, which is mind-boggling. When they drafted Worthy, we all thought, man, now they've got the explosive element. This guy's going to, average 19, 20 yards a catch. Worthy has evolved this season. Again, that's all we have, into almost being kind of a motion player who catches a lot of balls on the move. They use him when they run a lot of natural rub plays, and then they use run after catch, because obviously he's got a lot of juice. You saw that in the AFC Championship game. Critical play on, I think, their field goal drive that ended up winning the game, where he caught, on mesh, he caught the shallow crosser and it became a 24-yard gain. They've been using him more, almost the way you think of a good slot receiver, Adam. Guys who go in motion and catch shorter balls as opposed to a vertical threat. That's the way he's been deployed, much of this season.
Greg, when the Eagles have played teams that use 12 personnel but are good passing and running teams, the Eagles have probably, I would imagine, played nickel more and stayed in nickel. Do you think that would be the same case against the Chiefs? I would think that they would want DeJean on the field.
Yes. I mean, I could be 1,000% wrong. Believe me, we don't know. But I just can't believe in this game that the Eagles are taking DeJean off the field. I mean, maybe there's goal line situations, or, a 3rd and 1, and, where the Chiefs bring in 3 tight ends, that kind of. But in terms of just the normal flow of the game, Geoff, keep in mind, against the Commanders, they played nickel on all but 4 snaps the entire game. I don't believe they want to take DeJean off the field.
Makes sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, if you're the biggest issue you would have is, do you want to be smaller against a bigger offensive alignment? But really, Cooper DeJean's not a small corner, not a small nickel, and he tackles well, and it enables you to probably be more flexible, especially with Vic Fangio, Greg, and this will lead into my next question. I feel like Vic's going to have to do something maybe a little different if the Chiefs show that they can move the ball the way the Commanders did, but then take care of it as well.
Well, the other thing about playing nickel, too, is, again, Kelsey has not been the same player this year in terms – he's only averaged 8.5 yards per reception. The number of receptions that have produced first downs way down from previous years. But still, it's Kelsey, and it's the Super Bowl, and, no one would be surprised if, he's the number 1 target. But you also then have DeJean, who can play him man-to-man in nickel if you choose to play man. And there'll be snaps of man. We don't know what the percentage will be, but DeJean ends up being, let's say, a better man-to-man option than Blankenship, or even, to my way of thinking, even Gardner Johnson. So you have DeJean, to be able to match up to Kelsey.
Greg, one question off of that with Cooper DeJean, because, the thought that Geoff had and I had when we talked to personnel people before the draft was, okay, well, not sure if he's really an outside corner. He probably will have to start nickel and then be a safety in the future. And we'll see. We're not going to know until the spring, and they'll have to figure this out, because it's going to affect the draft, obviously. It's actually a major decision.
Yeah.
You've now seen his tape since he's been in. We know how much better the defense has been with him. The record is pretty remarkable. It's not just because of him, but it is interesting that since he's been here, since he's been playing, they're doing well. Let's take an overview of Cooper DeJean, where he's at from your tape study.
Oh, I love the player. It's funny. I loved him in college too, but the way in which he plays, I didn't think he was an outside corner coming out, but just he's intense, he's competitive, he's physical. Everything about being a quote-unquote football player. I know that sounds cliched, but hey, that's what coaches talk about too. The guy's a football player. He's really good in the slot. He's really good in zone coverage. He has a great feel for receiver splits, route concepts that come from receiver splits, because so much of that is pre-snap. Film study for underneath zone defenders it's true for safeties too, deeper safeties, but for underneath zone defenders, a lot of that has to do with receiver splits, the route concepts that come from those splits. He's really good at that. So I just think he's just a really savvy. I mean, if you didn't know who Cooper DeJean was and that he was a rookie, and you just Adam, one of your coaching friends said, "Hey, watch the Eagles defense," and he didn't know the player, you would not think he was a rookie.
All right. Great stuff. All right, listen, we are going to break this down even more when we do Inside the Birds pregame show over the weekend. This was just to whet the appetite, give people a little idea of what the tape has looked like all year long for the Chiefs and the Eagles. And Greg, it's breaking news. The tapes look pretty good for a team that won 14 games and a team that won 15 games. Aren't you surprised?
That's normally the case, Geoff. It's amazing how that works.
It's funny how that happens. I feel like an expert. All right, great stuff. We will be back for Inside the Birds pregame show this weekend. For Greg Cosell and Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher. You've been watching Inside the Tape with Greg Cosell and Inside the Birds presentation.